My name is Katie, and I interviewed my grandpa about his life growing up.
I was born in 1938, and this makes me 72 years old now, and I live in the exact same house that I was born in. I lived here all my life except for 2 years. When I was 7 years old, my father died and left my mother and I here alone. And I'll tell you a little bit about going to school. I went to the country school called Uniondale, which was about 2.5 miles from where I live. And I had a pony that I rode there to begin with, and we had a place called the Pony Barn, and every day I'd ride my pony down and tie it up in the pony barn, and then when school was over, I would ride it back home. Sometimes I would walk to school, which would take a little while, but I can remember walking to school, and then when school was over, I walked home, this was winter time, it was almost dark. And then I had to find the cow in the pasture, and we milked the cow and then took care of the chickens, and Grandma would help me do the chickens, but I had to find the cow and milk it. And sometimes I'd just take the bucket and go up in the pasture in a little stool, and I'd find the cow and she'd stand still and I would milk her right there. And that's how we got our milk first for our breakfast cereal and all the milk needs in the house. Then there was because my father had died and my mother never knew how to drive a car. So we didn't have any place to go, so at a very young age I learned to drive the car. And I remember that I had an older brother that was here, and he would back the car out in the morning when my mother wanted to go to church or to school programs at Uniondale. He would back the car out of the shed because I couldn't seem to do it without scratching the side of the car. And he went out the lane, and when I'd get home from school, we'd get in there and I'd have to sit on something so I could see out the windshield and drive my mother to church and to the school programs. And it always made me really nervous because I wasn't very old, and I was so scared. I can remember shaking sometimes. I was so scared to be driving that car, but it was the only way we had to go. So, and the car that I drove was an old 37 Plymouth, and it got us there and back, but it burned oil about as much as it did gasoline, and I remember it used to leave a smoke trail almost all the way from here to the church and school. The church was, by the way, located right near the school. So as time went on, my brother graduated from high school, and he went on off and just left Mom and I here alone. And during my high school years, I met this nice young lady who ended up being my wife, and we was married at a very early age, and so my mother still needed me here to help her because nobody else was around to do the chores, and I was doing the farming. And so we looked around and found a house just about a mile away from here where I could live and still be close to my mother. So we lived in this house for 2 years, the only 2 years that I haven't lived in this house. And we lived there until, well, I might tell you too that it didn't have any running water or anything, and over here we did, so we both used to come over here and take our baths. There wasn't any bathroom there, and no water heater or anything like that. We had to heat a little bit on the stove. But then after we lived there for 2 years, my wife was expecting our first child, so my mother said, "Oh, you can't raise a child over there because it's too cold." That house was a very cold house, and in the wintertime there was cracks in the wall, and sometimes we'd get up in the morning and there would be snow in the house blowing through the cracks in the wall. And so she said we couldn't live over there with a new baby, so she found a place to live near a friend of hers that could drive a car and take her to church and to town and that, and so she moved away from off the farm where she came to the farm when they were married. It was a brand new house when they got married, and she came to the farm then. And so that was her first time to move away and let us live here so that we could have a nice warm place for when our first child came. And then and she had chickens and things up there, so I had to take feed and things up there to her house too. So that's kind of the start of my young life anyway.
Thanks to my grandpa, who was always willing to help me.